Hey y'all, it's Matt with Fisherman Crossing. This week, we're gonna be working on tying up a miniature bucktail. Thanks for tuning in. All right, so let's get started. So first things first, you're gonna need some jig heads, right? These particular ones we're using today are 1/16 ounce minnow head jigs. You can find these at Walmart. They also have it in 1/32 of an ounce. So the one we're gonna tie up today, we're going to be using this shad gray bucktail. So a little bit different look than what I showed you in the intro. That one, we use more of like a chocolate brown, and I powder coat those heads brown. So first things first, we need an eyeball on this jig head, because as you can see, they've got a little embellishment there, but they do not have any contrast. So you can use whatever color nail polish you want on this. I'm gonna use the same one that we used from the video that I did for the tying up simple jigs, those simple marabou jigs. Normally I'd use black, but this is the most fresh nail polish I've got. So you're just gonna take your bodkin. All you're really trying to do there is drip it. So you want a controlled drip on the surface, and then you kind of have to let that dry before you flip it to do the other side. So what I'll typically do, just to make sure I don't lose track of it, I'll just take it, drop it in a bottle cap, and dry. I mean, it's pretty obvious what you'll do on the other side once the time comes around, so just repeat that process. Let's transition over to what it looks like to tie one of these up. We're gonna go with this shad gray thread. I believe this one's a 70 denier. And as far as flash is concerned, we're gonna use this crystal flash. This one came from Sportsman's. It's just a UV pearl. So it's kind of clear, but it throws off a really cool, pearlescent purple almost. Typically a fish this size, it doesn't swim very dramatically. It just sort of flutters that tail. So just anything we can do to kind of impart the illusion of motion. Bucktail is not going to, dance and undulate like marabou would. Just trying to mimic the silhouette of a bait fish with this in a bait fishy color, and then let that flash do its job of making it look like it's moving. So, all right, so we got a little thread base here laid. We're just gonna take that strand of pearl flash, double it over, line up our ends. Now typically what I'll do is I'll just measure out a jig length and just kind of eyeball that back. You can always trim this up after the fact as well if you want to. Just gonna kind of loosely put that in there. You still manipulate it some. And then work this flash around so that you're getting the two strands on the other side of the lure as well. I'm actually gonna flip how I'm holding this so that y'all can see better. So you can see there, we're just trying to hold it out the back. Wrap down that thread base towards the bend of the hook. And that's basically what you're left with. Now, flash is a matter of preference. It's entirely up to you as to how much you want to tie on this bad boy. I won't judge you if you put a ton. I also won't judge you if you only do the one. Just because this is the only one of these I'm tying up right now. I'm gonna go ahead and throw a little more on here. And just go under the bottom this time. All right, it's pretty well seated. I'm gonna use a whip finisher tool on this, but I am not going to cut this thread, because obviously we need to tie some hair on this thing. So So we'll just kind of work our way up. Lay down a thread base, and I like to kind of let this hang about there. Some people will come in here and they'll, you know, cut off the little collar, the keeper right there. I don't find that that's necessary. In some respects, it actually makes it easier for me to sort of index where my throat of the jig is so that I don't go too far off one side or the other. Slide the camera over here a bit. So you're just gonna pick a hank of hair. The thinner you tie this, the more lifelike presentation it's gonna have in the water. Remember, we're using this bucktail for the sake of silhouette, right? So when you grab a hunk of hair out of there, this is what you're gonna kind of be left with. You're still gonna have some guard hairs that are in there. Pull those out. Sometimes I'll save those, and if I'm also doing some 1/32 ounce, I'll try to use that hair rather than going back. But you know, once you sort of have a little bit of hair here, what we're gonna do is try to line up these tips. Now, there's a thing called a hair stacker, and I do use that sometimes. For the sake of this video, and I'm gonna assume you may not have a hair stacker, you don't actually need one. So just identify the hairs that are a little longer. The ones that are really long, just go ahead and pull those free. So you're not holding a death grip here, but you're holding this so that it's not freely escaping on its own. And then just kind of go back, bend your hair over, and you'll kind of get an idea of the length of what you've got in your hand and what kind of stuff you should be moving. So we're just gonna go with, you know, the moderate length. I'm gonna pull the long ones out here, and quite simply all I'm gonna do is work them back in so that we're getting the tips to about line up. Again, you are putting out a fishy silhouette, so this does not have to be a precise thing. It's just more so that you don't have kind of a crazy long hair just sitting out there. What we're gonna do is we're gonna tie in each side, right? So we're gonna take this lump of hair, and I'm just gonna get about half of it. Pulling that loose, okay. So we're gonna go back here, and we're gonna tie in this side. All right, so as we do this, we're just kind of looking at where our flash lays and keep the wispiest end of that hair there, all right? Because the silhouette, the profile of the fish is gonna start from obviously up here closer to the head. So loosely tie that in. Take a look at where your hair is. See how confident and comfortable you are with that. If you're looking at this and going, man, I just wish I had more hair in there, go ahead and tie you some more in there. I mean, you can use that whole hank of hair that we cut out of the bucktail there, and then just grab you some more. Again, I don't necessarily find that a bulky hair jig is more helpful in this size, and you don't necessarily need it to get a big flare out to the side on this. So we're just gonna go with this. We come in here, trim us up, put what I cut off in the discard pile. Now, you might be tempted to go ahead and kind of try to lock this in. It's up to you, but if your thread's pretty thick, you run the risk of kind of bulking that up prematurely. So I'll typically kind of let it hang a little. All right, so we're just switching which hand does the holding. Make a big loop, loosely wrapped, come around, cinch that down. Then you can come back in here and put the torque on it. We've tied up this mini bucktail. Now I'm just trying to, for my own edification, make sure I don't have any exposed edges of the fur. Come back, wrap it. That was a whole lot. If you're trying to figure out your whip finish, typically you're just gonna do 4 wraps, 5 maybe. Do more than one whip finish. Sometimes I start to looking and thinking, man, I'd like a little more coverage right there. And you can do that while you got the whip finisher going. 2, 3 is probably overkill. You want a little tension here, but you don't want to pull too hard and put any shock in that line. Kick it back and it will unwind your whip finish. Then you're gonna take your Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails, or You can use some Loctite super glue gel, whatever you've got on hand. I'm gonna get not a ton, but pretty good dollop on here, because this one, when I put the clear nail polish on here, I'm not just sealing the threads. You don't have to do this, but it does protect that eye that we've painted on if you just go ahead and throw the brush up front and not only coat the thread wraps, but also go ahead and coat that head some. That'll keep it looking a little more lustery, and again, protect the eye, which is your only point of contrast on there. So these things are great. You catch a lot of fish on these. Very, very versatile. Anytime you need a small presentation, I mean, basically what you're looking at there isn't much longer than 1.5 inches, 1.3 inches, something like that. So good little bait you can keep in your box in a couple different sizes. But thanks for tuning in today. Appreciate you joining along. Down below in the comments, go ahead and let me know if you've thrown anything like this before and how you like to fish a little bucktail jig like this. So thanks for tuning in.